Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the podcast. Today my guests are Baba Sashank and Vindhya. They are the founders and principals of Spacefiction Studio. So thank you so much guys for doing this. and actually I just want to tell you this before we start. When I put this poster out, a lot of people have reacted that they were really excited about this particular episode in particular. It shows that you guys are very popular amongst the the student groups from the architecture schools, especially in Hyderabad. So they have wrote a lot of questions. We don't have the time to go through all of them, but I've selected some, and also I have some of my own questions that I wrote. So this is a very young practice. It started in 2015. So I wanted to ask. Before we go to your practice, I want to know a little bit about your formidable years after your graduation. So can you give us a little walkthrough of those particular few years before your practice started?
So I did my graduation from JNAFAU here in Hyderabad.
Right.
So I, by chance or by whatever I got to intern in Mindspace architects during college. Actually, none of us had any clue about what true architecture was or how the field would be. Even when we were leaving college also.
Yeah.
But after working there, it's sort of like it was like a real eye-opener in terms of so what you thought was actually the architecture career was diametrically completely opposite to what was happening in real life.
Right.
So they asked me to continue working there, which we did. After my internship, I was there for about 5 years because I'm not usually a person who stays still in like one place. So, but there was so much to learn there. You would get challenged and you would get it's every day is like a learning experience there. Now it's kind of scary thinking what would my path have been if I didn't meet Mohe.
Right.
It's quite, so we got married in 2012 late November. So then we moved back to Hyderabad where I was still working. So there is this firm called Collage, I don't know if you know.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Swapnil and Advaita run that firm. So they also used to work with Eadara. So she started working there before we established the firm here. So that was almost like Mindspace because the idea is the office environment is pretty much the same. So just before coming here, we were both in we came back in 2015 and then we started.
Right. Nice. Interesting.
Yeah.
I think architecture happened by chance for me, I would say. Like I was always interested in putting things together or like finding some color that interests me for a certain phase of my life or something like that. But once I joined architecture, I think I got into the interest actually,
right.
Not really before that. And even then, I was always trying to see what really interested me because I was never, like he said, we were never stuck to one certain thing. So I went to Auroville, I went to Bangalore, and I was doing all sorts of things. Then Pratt happened by chance, and I think that's been the most challenging part of my life. And he's been witness to it when I was there. And Pratt was not so much about teaching you what is right and what is wrong,
right.
But they help you discover yourself and see what you are good at,
right.
And then build up on it.
Yeah.
So when I was at Pratt, I was all over. I was taking courses from printmaking department or communication department. I was just trying to do whatever I could in the time that I had there.
Yeah.
And yeah, then we came back at, like we said, after that we got married and moved to Bangalore, and the rest is what's happening so far. Yeah.
It's nice. So I actually want to ask a little bit more about Mindspace. When you said when I think there was another office called Collage which was also working, and you said that they were heavily influenced because they were working and they kind of adapted to their ideals. So this is actually a common thing which happens amongst practices which come from very renowned firms like those. So has that been also? Do you see that also happening to your own firm, or have you shifted away and do you have your own principles and ideals? Can you give us a little bit insight on that particular aspect?
The principles and ideals will not change, I think, till we, I mean, no matter how old we get, or no matter how experienced we get.
Mm-hmm.
But you sort of form these core beliefs when you get influenced by somebody. But initially, our work used to look similar to, say, Mohe's. I wouldn't be nowhere near Mohe's, but in visually,
Right.
it would.
Yeah.
But if you look beyond the visual, but that's how you start off. When you start off on something that you know, and then you
Correct.
slowly start evolving. It's
Right.
never like a finished process. It
Correct.
always keep happening.
Correct.
I'm not happy with what I did like 1 year back
Mm-hmm.
in terms of buildings or even
Mm-hmm.
art or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So,
The
but
spirit, I think, of all designs is the same. Like, what is it's just about how you are ending up with the final product is a different iteration.
but if you don't do that, then you'll never really like grow or evolve. So you have to make mistakes. And you have to learn. But those core beliefs, what we have been imparted there, I don't think we'll ever go. The concept of how a space feels is very a lot of people. I mean, it's quite rare that I've heard some architects talk about how a space actually feels like. I mean, they might talk about materiality and how the details of it, and but the planning aspect of it. But it's quite difficult to put it into words. How I mean, we know if you walk under a double express how it feels like, or if you walk under a bridge how it feels
Right.
like. We know that, but it's quite difficult to put it into words.
Mm-hmm.
So that whole multiplicity of experience, how many experiences can you make a person feel in a certain space and all that is what is a real takeaway from the whole form.
Right.
And
And
more,
I think when we talk about like sun or air or landscaping and trees, these are not all fancy or big words, you know. They are our everyday things, and we're just trying to make them integrated into simple spaces that you can truly enjoy, you know, the whole day and wherever you walk.
Right.
That's about it.
but more than architecture, we have learned. I think it's safe to say we've learned more about how to be a better person than most. Architecture is probably a byproduct of it, but
No doubt.
but how an office functions, how there are no like hierarchies, senior architect and junior architect and intern. Anybody who can works. This is how it is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that whole work culture is something that you will. There are a lot of people who went away from home and started their own firms,
Right.
but you will find that one thing: the work culture will be similar, and the core ideals will probably be the same. Language might be different, but that's each person's search. No? So you don't know where it will take you.
And you said I think you worked there for 3 years, or am I Five.
Yeah.
for 5 years? Did you build a really close personal bond with Sanjay Mohe? Do you still have phone calls, have pep talks, those kinds of things?
It's quite embarrassing, but whenever we get drunk, we usually message him. And Papa me actually replies back even if it is 2 in the night.
Oh, that's nice.
Oh, miss you more than we are.
And he makes it a point to actually visit us whenever he's in Hyderabad.
Oh, that's nice.
See what we're up to.
During the lockdown, also we exchanging some sketches.
Mm-hmm.
I make it a point to keep in touch.
Yeah.
Somebody who's that kind of an influence on you, that you can't afford to not be in touch.
Yeah.
I'm still scared to show him my work and all that, but still.
Yeah.
Yeah. We keep
I mean,
in touch.
the thing is mutual. It's not like we are showing our master or something, and it's mutual. He's also trying to like learn what we are trying to do. We are also like
Yeah, he
to see
doesn't
what
have that
says.
air of a boss or something like that. I've never seen him get angry all the time that I've known him. So it's more about it's in a very friendly zone. Even with her bosses, we always they are also quite.
They're still asking us about something.
That's nice. So you said Pratt was one of your most challenging phases in your entire career. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? What was really challenging about Pratt?
So the thing is, when you go from a system where you're taught in a very regimented fashion, and you're suddenly put in an environment where there are people from all over the world. It's just not like United States or something. It's all over the world. And there are people of different age groups. There was a guy who's like 40-year-old with us. And there are people from all streams who have suddenly found interest in why I did interior design. So that everybody's put together there in that like boiling pot.
Right.
And the faculty that was there is also from all over the world. So they have different ways of life, they have different ways to approach you, and it's a very culturally diverse studio setup. So it is very challenging on a day-to-day basis to like even converse or to put up with what everyone's coming up with and doing. So I think the first semester I struggled to like move away from what we are taught and how we are taught in India to like actually let my mind go and be there, present there. And that was challenging. And then from the second semester onwards, I think it was fine. Like, I think he knew about it. Most of it, like I used to call him every day, and I'm like, how am I going to put up with this? How am I going to get through this? But by the end, I think it was a good thing. Like I said, like after a certain while, I took my time, but then I started to just explore and do what I really want to do and like, and that changed.
Right. It's nice. And then you moved back to India, and then it was the same.
Yeah, we moved back to India, then we got married, and then we shifted to Bangalore. Then I worked with Collage, Mindspace. Then after like 3 years, I think we moved back to Hyderabad. That was like I think biggest step we took at that time.
So can you tell me a little bit about that? When does that conviction come to tell yourself this is the time that we want to start?
That's what I said. It is a big thing, big step that we took, because after a certain time you get comfortable and you're learning so much, and we were actually doing some really interesting work, both of us in our studios, some really big projects and things that we could have never imagined that we'd be doing at such an early stage in life. So, but I think somewhere we knew that we wanted to do something on our own, and sooner the better, and just have to jump and do it.
Right. Speaking about Mindspace, I live near TV5 office, and right beside it there is a Dr. Reddy Labs building, and the entire elevation of that building is covered with foliage of trees, so it's really hard to see that there's a building behind it. But then one day I was just there around that corner, and then this looks something very familiar, and it kind of struck that this is a Mindspace building. So there is a particular language that you can kind of distinguish what a Mindspace project is. So do you think your architecture also has a set style or a design language? Would you describe it in that way?
If you really look at Ghosh's initial work, he started building like, when he was working with Khan, he started building like Khan. When he was working with Corbusier, he started building like Corbusier.
That's true.
But those were his initial this thing. But if you actually, even if you see Korea's work, you can immediately tell that from the proportions, from certain elements, that this is probably Charles Korea's work. But if you actually see the idea behind the building, every building is an idea. Koreans, if you see, and I haven't seen any other architect translate an idea to a building that meticulously. But if you really believe that every building is an idea, language is just what do you say, a way of expressing it. But if you look beyond the language, I think every building will sort of have like if you take any of the schools, Mohe schools, the language might be the same, but if you actually see, they all have, I mean, every classroom gets like an open space. And you always have that option of going inside or outside. There is this one library that he did where he continued some steps up, and that was actually meeting some steps in the hillock at the back.
Mhm.
These are quite subtle things, but if you really imagine every building as an idea, then I think language, you should consciously try to change the language also.
Mhm.
But then again, there is that, he always talks about, see, we can take like 5-6 years and do one building somewhere and be really happy about it. Or you can do probably like 100 buildings in 5 years and be happy about it. But where do you really find the balance of? Because that's again an individual's choice, when you're practicing. Because he believes that, I mean, we also believe that you have to change architecture on a larger landscape.
Mhm.
Because that is something that we see every day. We keep always cursing this building, why is this building like that, right? But those are the people, it's tough to work with all those builders and all, but those are, if you want to change landscape on a large scale, then yeah, you should be okay with, you can't expect every building, you can't take like 5-6 years for every building, they all change all the details. I'm not saying you should not do that, you can do that, but at least I'm okay with finding the right balance between not being too much of an elitist in terms of taking your commissions or not being too much of a commercial person. Yeah. So language is something that you find the means of expressing an idea. It will change, but from building to building, it should ideally change.
Mhm.
But yeah, sometimes people call it, this is architect style or whatever. But,
Do you subscribe to that idea of a style, or is it?
I personally don't. I think every building should be unique.
Mhm.
Yeah. Even if you ask like 10 people to wear the same clothes, even if you change the colors, they're still the same clothes.
Mhm.
Right? So, I mean, if every person has a different personality, then every building should ideally be different in terms of expression, in terms of spirit, soul, everything. But, it's
Right.
just me.
So, I want to ask this. Since you both are the principal architects of the studio, it's a kind of like a collaboration effort. So, when a design brief comes to you, how do you take it on? Like, is it like Vindhya is in charge of the interiors because she specialized in that, and you're in charge of the architecture because you are more into that, or is it? How does it go between? Because everyone has their own. Design is very subjective. It's a little personal also in some sense. So, how does both of your thought processes or both of your ideas converge into one as a final result of one building? Yeah.
This was a very big thing when we started.
Mhm.
We had our moments in the office and
Mhm.
with projects.
Mhm.
But I think eventually we found like a comfort zone in what we are good at and what we can do.
Mhm.
And once you are in the real world, buildings or design is just not about finishing it on the computer or on the paper and present it to the client. There is some sanctioning work, there is structural drawings, there is site coordination, and there is material vendors, and there is like a team number of things to do. So he takes up the project as it comes. Like we go through the initial schematic of the design, and once that is done together, then it's done. Like the team takes it up and we process the presentation and everything. And then after the presentation, then I take over in terms of coordinating, and there's so much work in terms of getting the sanctions done, or like the initial iterations and revisions being done. So then we find our own common space of what has to be done, when it has to be done, and then it just goes. And once the building is on site getting executed, there are again like different branches of people involved.
I think what she's trying to say is basically like how Louis Khan says, no? Every building has a immeasurable, measurable, and immeasurable part of it. So when you first conceive it, it's all very romantic, and you see the building like that. That feeling is quite immeasurable. Then all this measurable part starts. Sanctioning, workers, vendors, clients, briefs, all these. Finally, again, when it's finished, and again you see people like living in it, experiencing it, that is again immeasurable, what the feeling that you first felt. But the stretch of it can be really long, because building is called building because it's never done, it's always happening. So, if it is not an idea, if it is just something you're doing for money, or if it is something that, if it's just a commercial, if it's just another project to you, imagine surviving that whole stretch of that measurable process. Unless you truly fall in love with the idea, and if you truly fall in love with the building, you will not be able to survive that whole thing. Because no matter what happens, you'll always be envisioning the end part of it, and you'll be like, okay, if I get through this, I need to be like that, it's fine. Some people make some compromises in between. As long as the original idea is not kind of disturbed, you're okay with it.
But what about the design? When it comes to design, you like one iteration, Vindhya likes another iteration. Who takes the final call?
I think we have reached a very good zone right now where that hardly happens anymore. It's almost like marriage affair, basically. So initially, there were some things that both of us will come with, and there is always that friction and finding a middle ground. But now it's kind. Before I even say it, she kind of knows what I'm trying to say, and some people might be intimidated to tell me, but she'll immediately tell me if something is not. She'll immediately say that this is not working. Or why don't you do another option or something like that. Which is also important. So it's not that idea. I do the design and everybody does it. Whoever, I mean, I don't care if even if there's a intern who gives them a really good idea, I whatever take it forward. It's like conducive to the whole thing.
And also, I think I've always struggled with thinking big in terms of project or a scale of the thing, and he's very good at thinking big and vast, and I can think to the minuscule.
Right.
So I think that balances us out.
So you say some people kind of get intimidated to come and approach you if they have an idea. So do they go towards like I have a little bit of a heavy criticizer in that sense?
No, I think it's mostly sarcasm.
You brought this up.
Yeah. I don't know, I think it's my defense mechanism or something. I don't know. But
nobody
but
wants
I
to
think
get
I think it's just that I just got a little busy nowadays. We used to spend a lot of time with everybody. Now we even sit with somebody and have a fun discussion. We used to do all these random things before. Nothing related to work.
Right.
Just sit and talk about some random documentary or something that I saw somewhere or some building that I saw which really moved me. And we used to talk for like hours. We used to have that kind of luxury of time. Now it's like we consciously made it a 5-day week because I come here on the weekends and that's the only time I get to design and think over things. Are we going in the right direction on these bigger things? Otherwise, we are always running around on sites. So it's become something like that.
Don't make it sound so serious, but yeah, like they're not intimidated. Like nobody wants to like let Baba say, "Oh, this is not right." You know, they don't want that to be said. They want to do their best and show him the best. So I think that's what it is. That's how.
But in the sense that you're more accommodating and people approach you first before they come to Baba. Sometimes.
I'm like the good cop.
Interesting. But speaking of site works and all of these things, what are the challenges that you face working in, with the consultants or the contractors in Hyderabad? What are the current trends and challenges when you're trying to execute a project in Hyderabad? I ask this particularly because there are some projects by S1Ep4 and all of them that his projects were executed in Hyderabad. When I was going through the other consultants and contractors, they were actually from Mumbai. They were not. He didn't appoint any local people here. So I was to achieve the kind of finishes for that particular building that I saw, it was kind of impressive, and I really wanted to know who that contractor was because the finesse and the final finishes of the building came out really well.
You're talking about that big building?
Yes, correct. That brick building, the Sienna apartments over here.
Okay.
So, how are the challenges here to get your project executed the way you wanted to and get that quality control here in Hyderabad?
Over a period of time, you start developing a team. That's one thing of being. But initially, we had a very tough time. We used to issue so many drawings to most minuscule detail, and they would be somewhere in some hut where nobody would be using it. They'd be using it as some pillows or something. And when I realized nobody really because the trained and skilled people are quite in depth here. So it's quite. But we find some gems here and there over the process, trial and error. Over a period of time, we found some really good carpenters, fabricators, people who are dependable. So we kept evolving a team like that. But
it's still a struggle.
it's still a struggle. Once it's fully resolved, it's still a struggle.
But then you have to do that, we get down to teaching them, this is something new, why don't you try this? And they are also learning, and I think that's also a collaborative process. You teach them, they get better,
Right.
they can do better.
And it's not, it's not as professional as it is in Bangalore or
Right.
Bombay. So if you actually see the construction labor here, they're actually not construction. They're all migrants who are doing who were into some other profession. Come here for work, and they just know the basic stuff. Like when the ministry tells them to do it in a certain form, they can follow instructions. But that's it's not like from Rajasthan or Bombay, where their family was into construction. It's not something like that. And if you're looking at specifically doing something like rammed earth walls or exposed concrete walls, so it mostly falls under that luxury category where you have to either spend time or you have to spend money on the problem usually. So but we're always looking for good people to work with. And if you do find also, it's like, after 5 years, we found a good fabricator. 4 years, we found a good fabricator. So, yeah.
If that is a state of situations here in Hyderabad, how does that affect or limit your design? Because if does it restrict your creativity, or when you want to really push the boundaries in some sense, but then you kind of step back because this is the state of situations, and you kind of think that this might not be possible with the current state of contractors or builders in Hyderabad. So does it affect your design process? Are you conscious about that?
I am actually. For this house, this whole yellow thing that you see is going to be exposed brick,
Mhm.
but
Related.
granulated exposed brick, because actually this wall goes for almost like 3 floors. There's a side like that. So you actually see from there that whole wall washes with like light.
Right.
So it's not. So the contractors who are doing the house are in no way equipped to do that.
Right.
So how do you? So we consciously divided this whole structure and that brickwork separately. So that's actually a rat trap bond wall. Where the outside part is plastered, the inside part is like exposed. But so we consciously separated the structure. The beams and all go into the outer layer, because we know that this brickwork has to be done by somebody else. So we separated the structure. So you will have to do some little gimmicks here and there. But that is because you already know that environment. So that brick team has to come from Pondicherry or somewhere, and they have to execute. So we make some small changes like that, but it doesn't affect the idea. That's why, like I said, if you have a larger idea as a whole, but there will be compromises. I've made compromises, but that will be like only 1-2%.
We also try to push what we can do and what they can do. It's an everyday thing.
Right. When you are starting your office, I want to understand the process of starting your office. Do you declare that you have a studio when you have your first project, or do you start your studio and then you get projects? How does the declaration of my inception as an office starts?
We only had one laptop, and we used to go to coffee spaces and coffee shops and meet clients. Fortunately, the first client that we got was insanely good in terms of letting us do whatever we want and giving us the freedom.
We were lucky actually to get a residence project as a first project to begin with.
Actually, we got it when we were there in Bangalore, when we were thinking whether we should. Once you really can't, you have too much on your plate, and at some point when the work slowed down there, then I had to tell. It seemed like a good time to shift to Hyderabad at that time. Then after that, we never really had like a studio. We were working on the project. We had just had a laptop. We kept going to sites, finishing it. Just as soon as that was getting finished, the contractor of that project told us he was looking for an office space. Would you guys like to share an office space? And then we found a very small office space there. Before this, we moved in with him and we hired the first architect, because we started getting some work. It was mostly pitching. It was not really anything concrete.
But we were working. We were working every day.
We were working, yeah. Now I'm glad those pitching projects didn't happen, because when you look back, it was all like, God, what did we pitch and how did we do and how did we... I mean, it's all... that's how it works. But unless you take that jump, none of this will happen. You have to take that jump at some point. Fastest way to learn is just by building. No books or no amount of working with somebody can teach you. You have to jump in and you have to start doing it. You will learn exponentially faster. Because all these experiences will keep happening on a day-to-day basis. Dealing with contractors, clients.
And I think after that it was just word of mouth, and good thing was that first project was got published and got enough appreciation also. So then that took it a little further in terms of people realizing, oh, these people are young but still can do really good work if we can trust them.
So, in your design or in your buildings, there was this reoccurring element or feature that I've noticed where there's a sense of playfulness in the design. And what I mean by that is, you have all these multiple levels. There are windows not just opening towards like the outside, but also towards the inside. So there's this multiple points of visual contact within the inner spaces. There's a little bit of pop of color and patterns going on. And then there are like a lot of juxtaposition of different architectural elements popping out, and it's like a subtraction and an addition kind of form of it. So do you see this as a sense of playfulness, and does it come from your interest as a comic where you see things in a very colorful and a playful manner? It's just an observation that I had, but how would you like to answer to that?
No, I don't think it's comics, but
or is there any link between your other interests as a comic, or you're also interested in street magic? Do you see that somewhere subconsciously influencing your design a little bit?
I don't think I'm a very serious person in general. So I don't. I take architecture seriously, but only in spirit. I don't. I'm not dead serious about what. At the end of the day, it should be fun for me. Otherwise, there's really no point in doing it. Even through all the measurable process, even through going through hell on site and all that, even through all that, at the end of the day, I find a certain joy in it. The playful elements, we never consciously did it. I mean, if we use some color here and there, it's only because it adds a certain depth. And yellow subconsciously is a happy color, so we don't think twice before using yellow. Of all the colors that we tried, that amplifies the space, yellow worked the best so far. So whenever there is some sense of depth needed, we, without thinking, we usually do like yellow and most initially our buildings were quite stark white and all, so that probably created quite a contrast. And a lot of people always ask us, why do you use yellow? Like I said, now none of our buildings are white. All of them are
none of our new work is white or
so none of
and that also says that we are trying to experiment with new finishes and materials and surfaces and everything.
And in that sense, do you see this as a turning point to your practice, where now it's also exploring the next phase of different kind of vocabulary as a
Yes, because if you see the trend of other projects happening, forget in the world, in India at least, some unbelievably good work that is happening, especially from the new age firms. So there is no choice. You have to evolve. You have to do something different. Consciously, you have to do something different. I mean, I always keep that in mind before putting pencil on the paper. So, yeah, and those elements that we are talking about, which we are doing, it happens over a period of time. Once you get the greater idea, building takes about like 1-2 years. And within that 1-2 years, we work on it on an everyday. Till the last day, we still keep designing, we keep doing something, we keep adding something. Because if you do everything on paper, keep it ready, and just execute the project 2 years, it sort of gets like stagnant, right? Because 2 years is a long time for technologies to develop, for new things to come into play, languages to change. So I always believe you can still keep doing something to the building, it always still be ending.
What keeps you excited when I see some architects, they've been in the profession for more than 10, 20 or 30 years. They've come to a settling point because they've seen it. Like they've done good projects, they're doing good projects, and they know the cycle of the project and all of that. But what keeps you guys going? What keeps you to think that? First of all, I want to understand what are the scale of your operations going on right now. So how many do you take up, or
at any point, I don't think there will be more than 10 projects running in the office.
Okay.
10 will be running.
Okay.
But irrespective of scales, that 10 before used to be like small houses. But now we are doing really large residences.
We're doing an international school.
We're doing a school. We're doing a research lab, an R&D center, a research lab.
Some very large scale houses.
30,000-40,000 square foot houses.
Wow. Okay.
But at the same time, we're doing even small things like just designing
We're
a
doing
pavilion.
barometric. exploring some designs for pavilion. But if we there is one small project, that's whole garden that we did for 220 square yards. Now that we've given our best in that 220, there is really no point in doing another 220 square yards. We still keep getting calls asking us, will you do another 220? Do another 220? You can do, but when you truly give your best to one project, you can probably do it one more time. You can probably do it another time, but more than that, you can't.
So that's the saturation point.
Yeah. So we used to do a lot of hospitality projects before. I consciously stopped taking it. So when people call me and ask me, will you do this bar, I get against it.
Why? Because you've done too many hospital.
Not too many, I gave my best at it all.
Okay.
And hospitality is a different ball game. It's not like a house where you can take 2 years to build. That land will be under lease. So you will only get 6 months to do 2 years worth of detailing. In that 6 months you will have to plan it in because the amount of detailing is the same, whatever, even if you do it in 2 years. So you'll have to do it in that 6 months. So it is like a burnout thing that. And we did a bar from scratch. We did a bar on a rooftop. We did 2 bars from scratch. So let's say they give me an interior project and ask me to do a bar. I really don't find being in beta. It's not quite challenging. Even if they give us a fresh site and then say build a bar here, yeah, probably you can do it one more time. But beyond that, you consciously have to move away and start doing something. I think we'll stop doing residences also after some years.
No, as this past year, I think consciously we're trying to not take up every project that comes our way and be mindful about taking up what we really want to do. So that filters out a lot of things.
So if you do a school now and that gets published, you will get awards, whatever, and it comes out really well. And after that, you will get 2-3 more schools. There are different scales. You'll do them, but then you will always start looking for a different kind of typology. Probably, I would love to do probably a temple or a mosque or something like that. So you consciously, if we start looking for it, they will come. Eventually, they will come. Definitely, they will come. But that's what will keep you going. Like you asked about completely being saturated.
Do you take up a lot of competition projects as well? Are you open to doing international competitions or competitions within India? Have you had an opportunity to do those?
We've always discussed it.
We are open, but I always find that I always find that it depends on it's highly dependent on what that particular day, how that particular jury member is feeling. And basing so much work on that particular film is, I'm not saying it will go to, nothing goes to waste. A lot of them are like undone ideas which I keep putting in, which I always use somewhere. So either it's a waste, but I'd rather put that time into research or do some bring out, maybe make a comic book or something like that, or I'll pursue or get better at art or something. I always thought that was, but there is I don't know, it's not about the sense of achievement or anything, because we used to do a lot of competitions in college. We won a lot also. And I know how that this thing feels when you're rushing through to finish this thing and you get there. It's an exhilarating experience. I really love it. And when you test yourself among the bigger the platform, that is also an amazing feel. But when you're consciously doing something right now in your career and all that, it's just a matter of thinking whether the time is really worth doing it or not. It's no other.
No, but that said, if something really good comes our way and we have the time and the right time around it.
Yeah, like we did that. What was it?
Delhi thing.
Yeah, we did one.
The memorial.
War memorial thing.
We spent almost like 2 months on it. The entire studio we went through it. We sent that presentation.
Not because we wanted to win. I know it will definitely go to somebody with some government, this thing or whatever contractors, something. But I knew that chance was always there. I don't know if later they could have won, but we really wanted to do it because such a nice competition. So there. We don't actively look for competitions, but sometimes people keep sending some interesting things to me, some things that I really feel like working on. Those we do.
Yeah. Interesting. So, amongst your contemporaries, can you name a few practices that you really like their work and that might want to collaborate also in a sense? Are you open to collaborating with other offices if you get a chance, or are you kind of individualistic in that sense?
Collaborations are fun. That's what I'm saying. These collaborations, competitions can happen, but that is if we get some time in a day. Our whole day is occupied by calls from sites and calls from clients, and so if I get at least one day in a week, we'd be open to doing all these competitions, collaborations. But collaborations need not necessarily take up your time. Collaborating with somebody, it's almost like putting out a work. We do it. There are a lot of young practices that we are inspired from on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, can you name a few, like your favorites and your favorites?
I think we have common favorites.
Oh, okay.
They are quite unestablished.
No, it doesn't have to be a contemporary, but
No, some works that we regularly look up and think they are, resonant with what we also like to do, or like Spasm.
Not just in India, I think both from me are doing insane.
BTN is doing
they are doing amazing work. I feel. There is that other Vietnam film.
Big house.
Yeah, we are in this tropical, in a lot of farms. Vietnam is coming up with insanely good architecture, whether it is a very small space or whether it is a really large residence. They are finding these really new languages to go about. In India, we know this one living frog are our friends. She also used to work with Mohe, Athira and Bhairav. They are doing some really, really good work. Experiment. Yeah, when it comes to experimenting with stuff, I'm always inspired by Virudani, who's doing some amazing
And there are some really young
people
also doing very, very well.
Collective project is doing some really good work. Sometimes, even today, Mohe is still doing some insane amazing work.
True.
He did one college recently, which literally blew my mind. I haven't been there, but from the concept of it. It's a Bangalore Institute of Technology. They did the new architecture block. Completely redefines the classroom and studio space. There are really no walls, there are really no windows, there are really no doors. If you somebody, even Samir Padora's work, if you see, he's breaking some really amazing new barriers.
True.
So it's not, I don't think it's more of a firm or an individual, it's more about these projects that we see, which immediately wants us, which immediately makes us take a fresh paper and start again and do something else.
And it's not just architecture or interior design, right? You can get an idea of from anywhere. So we read a lot, we watch a lot of movies. It comes from everywhere.
So you've said you've done a lot of competitions when you were in college. So actually, this is a very popular question that I got. Right? They wanted to. I think people still talk about you in JNAFAU. Yeah. So What was your time spending in JNAFAU like? And you were from CSIT.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, oh, by the way, how did you meet? If you were from CSIT and you were from JNFU, tell us a little bit about that.
We met you in NASA.
Oh,
We were
so NASA is the uniting.
And we kept meeting at every NASA.
Yeah, we attended the same competition, and, which I won.
I kept second.
Which one was this? Which one was this?
It was some on the spot.
Architectural dictionary or something.
Okay. Okay.
So I think that's when we got
This was in 2005. 2005.
Where was the convention at?
Bangalore.
Okay.
So that's where we met.
But yeah, he's quite, like you said, he's quite popular with the staff and the students even out there.
Have you had a chance to visit recently? Anytime?
Yeah, I go for I take some juries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still call me for some juries. But it completely. I was quite aloof in college. Spent most of the time in library. Keep doing myself, and there is my friend Varun. Now he's not into architecture. He's doing a lot of movies. So we used to constantly test cells, first in college, then with other colleges in NASA. That sort of had some adrenaline like this thing. Once we passed that, we even did a worldwide competition, which we the finals was in Rotterdam.
Interesting.
So it was about flood housing. So
But I think it was the initial college competitions really prepped.
Yeah, it got us like super fast in terms of made us super fast in terms of software, like immediate setup thinking and working on time. So that competition that I attended in Rotterdam really made me see how much we can Indians you can produce in a given amount of time. There were people from Pratt, China, Denmark, but they could produce probably like 10% of what we can, and if you give like one day. I mean, this can be true for most of it because we are used to that kind of pressure on. So if you really give 24 hours and say this is all you have, this is how much, this is the brief, do whatever. We made 3D model sections, we made a walkthrough, and so all of them had like some Photoshop conceptual sections or something like that being out there. So,
and you're from CSIT?
Yeah, like this, likewise, like we did a lot of competitions and during college, won a lot of them also every year. What was it called? LIK, this Hardcore, and we were part of this magazine also. We pitched and we won for the zonal magazine to be printed.
Okay.
So I became the editor of the magazine also. So, it's not just competition, there's so many things happening. You just need to be aware and take it away.
How important is it to, to see other things apart from just architecture, and what are your particular interests?
me?
In both of you?
No, it's like, I frankly, just today morning I was just exploring nail polish colors, how they're like so vibrant and so different, and the hues and, tones of it. Like, I can find anything in it.
In my mind, I'm seeing all the female figures going. You just said that.
Saying, that's the most top of my mind what I was going through. But inspiration, like I said, we watch a lot of movies. So even when we watch a movie, we're continuously saying what's the space like, where is the space, and what is this movie? Parasite.
Parasite, right.
This movie good. comparison. We were so like smitten by the house and the
they
details
appointed
of the
an
house.
actual architect to actually make that entire set.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was impressive.
So we watched the movie like 3-4 times just to like visually see the house and understand what has been done on the house. So,
it's very fascinating.
We finished, I finished all the movies in English, so I moved to other languages. Started, finished almost Tamil, Malayalam, Telugu. Now we went to Korean. Korean also I finished most of the stuff. We were really running out of things to watch. But now there is absolutely no time because there are so many, like I have about a billion pending projects, personal projects.
In the sense, your other...
I wanted to, there are some scripts that I'm writing for an anthology. There is I have 3 graphic novel scripts pending, for which some of which I even did the layouts for. I just don't have the time to sit on the background and ink them. So, and we have a daughter. She'll be 6 this July. So once you're completely dead with office work, you will have to engage her for another 5-6 hours, which is quite difficult task. I'm surprised that was not the Vindhya question. Because architects with kids is something else.
Oh yeah, let's talk about a little bit about that. So how do you does she come to office? Does she get to see what's happening here?
Especially,
she knows what architecture is.
Right.
She knows both of us are architects / designers. So she calls the Soul Garden house cheese ball house. So she thinks all the circles are cheese balls.
That's an interesting observation.
So we take her to sites. She comes to office. She engages with all our staff.
But I just don't put her there. I also ask her, like in that courtyard, when once it's finished and we were shooting the house, I took her to the central space. I gave her time to observe everything. I said, walk around and tell me how you feel. She actually tells me very specific things. Like I like this particular part. It's very nice.
You'll be amazed at what they can actually tell you.
Is she designing her own bedroom right now?
She can actually draw a plan.
Wow.
She can actually draw a plan. She can draw the dining table and light switch and everything. I think that's a big offer.
I'm rubbing my music taste on her as well. So, she listens to a lot of heavy metal.
That's so cool. It's interesting. Do you also have a pet dog?
Yeah, we
in the
have
office?
a dog in the office.
It's nice. So this is one thing that I really bugged me because as an architect, I don't know, maybe it's also similar with other professions, but you're just so swamped with time. And whenever I meet with professionals, they said, I wish I had 48 hours in a day, not 24. So how do you pan out your time? Like you're doing this, and I'm kind of surprised because it's a hard task for me to, I understand when they say they're really busy with stuff. I totally respect that I'm not like thinking, why it's just an hour, why can't they do it and all of that. So how important is it to, put time for other stuff as well? Because there are people, I ask this specifically because there is this entire culture in other offices that I've heard a lot that they work over the weekends, they work extra hours, they work late nights, and I'm surprised because I cannot particularly see myself doing that. But I'm not saying to say that's right or wrong. I just want to know this perspective as well because this is a firm which is doing good work, that is a firm which is also doing work, and it's possible in both these scenarios. So
when somebody asks me, I'm planning to do my internship here, but I always tell them the same thing. That the work a firm produces and their office environment are completely different aspects. They cannot be the same.
Yeah.
I till date never understood why people work late. Never. We leave by 5:30. If it is taking you a long time, then I don't know. There must be some communication mistake or some lag or I don't know the industry because we never got once also late in Mindspace also. I think in college we were wanted to party probably, but never. Once I did in Mindspace because we had a huge review. It was like a 9 lakh square foot building of research lab, and all our drawings were being checked by some American architects who were there just for checking. So they used to actually point out mistakes and scan them and send them back to us. And there was a certain time before which we had to that US time that before which we had to upload the drawings and all. For that kind of a weird once in a lifetime scenario, only we stayed back. And probably one competition, I think, that Titan competition that Titan campus office that Mohe did, we were working on that one. Only once or twice that happened, but never. So
I think we both are the kind of people who need our personal space and want to do other things and relax or indulge in a few more things. So we try to keep the same for our office environment or everybody who works for it. I also like our whole team. Same thing. So we don't like to do something. It's not like we are working less or postponing things. I think we are.
I've learned how to get work. I mean, tell exactly what I want and everybody in the office is super fast with software, everything. And if you're very clear about what you want and what has to be delivered on site, then I don't think there will be an issue of staying late and.
So finally, I want to ask about your current projects that you're doing right now, and what has been the journey been so far like?
So I think like we were just mentioning this last year and this year we are consciously trying to do something different and move away from doing certain projects at certain scales, and we are looking for new things, and there's a lot of new projects coming in the pipeline, and
we're doing one amazing farm, I think it should be, which has
farmhouse,
which are just separate pavilions, not exactly rooms. That will happen soon.
School will be done soon.
School will be done soon. They're casting the second slab now.
We are very keen about it.
Yeah, we never thought our first school project would be so big. That terrace house is happening. See the series of terraces. That's happening. It's not just terrace, inside also that whole volume. There are 2 double-head volumes which are connected. That house is finished, the structure is almost finished now, only finishings are happening. This house is on the first level. Quite kicked about this house.
And we're trying to do something new in every project, so I think it keeps us going to like really watch out for what's happening.
Right.
What else are we doing?
We're doing that pavilion, and we're doing a play-out project.
Probably our WhatsApp will our WhatsApp groups will be more informative. The research lab is happening. Research lab started on site. So it's going to be. It's right beside that IKP knowledge path which Mohe did.
Now, finally, I want to ask this. There's a huge number of people, who are young graduates who just passed out or who have been working for the last couple of years. Any advice that you want to give to these architects or junior architects or just recent pass outs regarding, how to pursue your own practice? When is a good time for you to come out and this has been like what should be the kind of thumb rules that one should self-examine when they're about to start their practice.
About to start their practice or immediately after the graduate?
At any point of time when they want to.
I think when you're in college, just before joining an internship or anything, I think it is imperative that they have an amazing good portfolio first, and they write personal letters to the firm, personal emails to the firm, write it out more personally. You have to choose very carefully where you do your internship or where you choose to work in your formative years, because that is what will either make or break the career. I know very talented architects who worked in the wrong places and decided just to give up architecture and do something else in life, who could have been something else in architecture. I wouldn't necessarily call them brittle spirits, but sometimes an environment can also play a huge part in what you decide. You should get up to date with the technology. You should be really good with like softwares and all that, because at the end of the day, they're just tools to transfer your idea. But you have to be to get ahead in this thing. But when to start practice and all that really depends on how much you learn. If I was there for another 5 years in Mindspace, I'm pretty sure I would still not be ready to start my own practice. You will never really know. At some point, you just have to start making your own mistakes and start learning. You will know that time. At some point, you will be getting projects and you will feel that you're doing good enough, and you will feel that you're confident enough to take on the project. And that's when you can.
And that uncertainty you should be able to get over, and whenever it is.
Well, on that note, thank you so much for doing this podcast. I found this very breezy and I liked it. It was very nice to particularly interact with someone who's not like super senior to me, but but yeah. So it's in that way. I think I really resonated to many things that you were actually saying today and we were discussing about. Thank you so much, Baba, Sashank, and
Thank you.
Exactly.